Indeed, it has been a blast. Thank you all for joining us. I would like to thank you again for coming together and enjoying this discussion about mushrooms, microdosing, business, and markets. Our goal today is to engage in an insightful discourse on the intersection of markets and mushrooms. I'm Ian Michael Bollinger. I'm an entheogen researcher and founding partner at Critical Consulting LLC. I write a weekly entheogen scientific blog called Understanding Entheogens, and also work with my clients to help them understand entheogen products and produce and their production through scientific analysis. I would like to introduce you to the most amazing and diverse group we have gathered here today with deep backgrounds in disruptive markets. First, we have the ever-inventive influencer, leader, and community space builder, Susan Chappell. Could you wait for us, Susan? Thank you very much. She is the president of Haven Labs, as well as the vice president of research and development. Her work has been strongly focused on building and influencing emerging industries, including the cannabis industry, as well as understanding their regulations and how they're implemented. So thank you for joining us today, Susan.
Thank you for having me, Ian.
Also thankful to have the deeply experienced team builder and clinical research expert, Sabrina. She is not actually able to engage with us here physically, but she is in chat, so I do want to give her a shout out. She was not able to make it to the actual part of the panel. She is the COO of Node Group Incorporated and president of the Clinical Research Association of Canada. She has over 2 decades of hustling hard in the healthcare and clinical research industry, and she has helped to bring efficacy to phase 1 and up to phase 4 clinical trials, and has been expanding those kinds of spaces to include entheogens like cannabis. So digitally, we'd like to thank you for coming, Sabrina. Thank you very much for joining us. Also grateful for the inspirational, insightful, and resilient Kelsey Ramsden. If you don't mind, Kelsey, could you wait for us? She is the co-founder and COO of Mind Cure Health. She is a talented female entrepreneur, actually being named Canada's #1 female entrepreneur twice. She has her work tends to specialize a little bit more in manifesting those disruptive aha ideas and kind of bringing those together, and then also exploring the frontiers of where business markets tend to go. So thank you for joining us, Kelsey. And then also we have from District Psychedelic, the political mover and shaker, advocate, and cultivator, Seth Rosenberg. He has successfully helped shape the landscape of the East Coast psychedelic renaissance and actively works to advocate safe use of all entheogens. So thank you for joining us, Seth.
Thank you.
And last but not least is the insightful, well-connected, and dedicated first responder, Nadia Van der Heyden. Director of Sales and Marketing of Psygen Labs. Her own experience with PTSD and trauma as a first responder really informs her path. She foresees bottlenecks in the supply chain and with the demand of these kinds of medicines to help treat those kinds of situations, and works to educate and push forward the production of entheogens like psilocybin, grown or synthesized, to fill these gaps. So thank you, Nadia, for joining us.
Thank you.
I would like to, if possible, kind of jump into things. I'm going to start off with Susan. I believe your expertise is very much in market and regulations, as well as, kind of where the cannabis industry was and where it is now. So with the growth of the cannabis industry over the past decade, we've seen numerous states produce different regulations. Do you think that this regulated path will be the same for other Schedule I substances in the next decade, or do you think it'll become more of a federally regulated good?
So that is a massive question. Thank you for asking that first. I really appreciate that. Yeah, my background has always been in healthcare advocacy. And I ran for politics to change access to plant medicines in my community and build policy. And I think that what is left out of all of these questions is the integration. We talk about federal regulations, we talk about state regulations, provincial regulations. And in the cannabis industry, it's been fascinating to watch that industry. You talk about how it's exploded. Well, I feel it was exploded before. I've been in the cannabis and I've been watching and a part of the cannabis industry for a very long time now. The vertical integration that the cannabis industry had beforehand was massive. So we had a full supply chain of growers. We had distributors and brokers. We had research was very limited because it was controlled at the federal level. So integration into medicine was being done basically through advocacy. But many of the people on this podcast on the presentations today have pointed out enforcement. So I think that when you're talking about integration of the industries and all these nascent industries, it's really a policy-based question. And the municipalities are responsible for enforcement. And the provinces are usually responsible for distribution in cannabis, and the federal government is responsible for ensuring that there is enough research, that the data integration is precise, and that there is no harm being done to our population. So the really interesting thing about the difference between psychedelics and cannabis is that cannabis has never had a mechanism. So although people have taken it for time immemorial, the mechanism is really poorly understood. The disease profile is very, very small. We know it affects the CB1 and CB2 receptors. And we don't know anything really after that. We know self-reported claims and N=1 integrations, but and it's readily available because of the harm profile. Whereas psychedelics have a very well understood mechanism. It also has multiple decades of excellent research being done, and many of those researchers are on the Mushroom Conference today, which I really appreciate. The only real commonality is the way we look at agriculture products as becoming medicine for the people and the policy involved to integrate this. So federal policy is making sure there's a safety profile, but the war on drugs has disrupted all of this. I like to call it the war on drugs propaganda, and I think we talk about this way too much. And meanwhile, the people are accessing the medicine as they need to have it accessed. I think the only hole in the real market that needs to be addressed is safe and standardized medicine and a massive amount of education in the medical colleges, the pharmaceutical colleges. With cannabis, this didn't happen. It became legal in Canada, and in many, many states have legalized the product, while the federal government remains illegal. So all that affects is supply chain metrics. Really, people are accessing the medicines as they need to access it. There's cultural reforms that are happening, and there's a blossoming of people that have discovered that this is a way better way to deal with their pathologies. Psychedelics have such a wide profile of disruption in the medical space. I just think that this is going to be such an interesting thing to watch, how we integrate the regular vertical economy that already exists. We have mushroom grows all over the world. People have no problem accessing this medicine, and how pharmaceutical and markets are going to react to integration and policy reforms.
That's really an awesome answer. You touched on some amazing things there. Did any of our other panelists have any thoughts on what she said?
Pretty much covered it.
Exactly. Some of the things
I muted my mic. I had it muted there for a second. Yeah, I think it was a great assessment and analysis. I think one of the things that's really important for people to understand is the idea of this stark contrast between legality, decriminalization, legal access, because to your point, people can access these medicines in a variety of ways as it stands. And I think just so there is this big gaping hole around education of, I hesitate to use the word proper use. I mean, safe use, I think is maybe, and or high use with high efficacy or optimal efficacy of these medicines in a way that's really respectful of their power, because they are powerful technologies. And I think it's worthwhile kind of just putting another exclamation point behind Susan's comments on those things.
I really appreciate especially what you said about how the real holes in the current systems exist only in the medicine side of things, like safe and standardized medicines. I agree. And I also love how you say that education across the board is necessary, because I really think that that is what conferences like this try to really engage and spread the word about. So thank you, Susan. That was really insightful.
Thank you. And Kelsey, thank you for adding that. Excellent.
If you don't mind, I would like to go ahead and move on to Kelsey, if that's okay, and ask your question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
As it stands, my understanding is your background is very much in med tech and how you can actually envision kind of disruptive business models in the frontiers that currently exist. So what kind of new disruptive technologies or business models do you feel are going to be probably coming out in the next decade with these new markets? Ones that might, affect the general populace, the pharmaceutical industry, and maybe the world, kind of small picture, big picture.
Yeah, I love the world thinking. And so I think as we sit right now, there are a number of companies entering into the psychedelic space with a kind of specific focus on med tech. So we have, and I'll just name a few. I won't capture them all. I'll probably miss some if you're listening. I'm sorry. There's OzMind and MindLeap. Maya is doing an amazing job. MindStrong, Quantified Citizen from out in BC in your neck of the woods, Susan. Atai. So there's a variety of people, MindCure, a variety of people involved in med tech. And I think what's interesting, things I like to observe around emerging industries, and this, I hate to call this an emerging industry. It's not emergent. It's been around for a long time. It's just people have started to pay attention. So that's a little bit different. But this idea that medicine can be transformed by virtue of pairing it with technology. And there are a lot of different ways that people are approaching this. And I think if we're looking at this from a traditional business perspective, it's always fascinating when you see people's different ideas about how to come to market. So as this emerges, we have people who are taking what I would call a traditional med tech play around scheduling patients, like the kind of really top of mind, like, what are your problems? Okay, it's scheduling patients. That's a hard thing. Sometimes it's patient follow up or follow through with protocols, because you may have a patient under your care who then goes off and doesn't quite know what to do next. There's onboarding, so a list of assessments, back to kind of the original point, and I'm sure you would have heard this echoed time and time again throughout the day, the importance of safe and effective use of these medicines. So there are people for which these medicines are not appropriate. There are a multitude of people for which they are. And so some interesting ideas around onboarding and making that more effective and helpful to patients. Some things with wearables tying into doing different metrics that we were traditionally accustomed to measuring around mental wellness. So it was traditionally, we had this very unstructured data, which is what I'm giving you right now, some things coming out of my mouth, and taking that unstructured data and structuring it. I saw Tyler Bryden in the comments. Hi, Tyler. He's doing a great job of that with Speak AI. So there's a variety of people coming at the problem, if we call it that, or an opportunity for support of technology in behind this work. But I think the thing that's most compelling around this med tech phenomenon is this idea that I think goes so well with psychedelic practices of really onboarding the patient as a colleague in care. So this idea that you're not unwell, or you're not broken, or you're not to be told what to do, but you're to be a partner in your own care. And a lot of the technology that's doing this really well, I feel, is taking that patient perspective and saying, this isn't necessarily about solving problems for the clinicians. This is about helping the clinician solve the problem better for the patient, which then therefore folds back into making the clinician's experience easier and better. And so I think the more that med tech can be onboarded in a really mindful way, keeping that that empathetic approach with the client in mind, or the patient in mind, or the individual who's just looking to advance their personal growth and understanding. Because I think we're also focusing a lot on specificity of dis-ease of the mind, as opposed to the notion that a lot of these medicines can also be helpful for just personal growth and understanding, clarity and focus, really fundamentally basic aspects of our mental function. And so to kind of bring it back to this idea about, okay, so the general populace can be helped out by virtue of this notion of ongoing support, what I call the tail end of therapy. So you're not kind of spit out with your eggs scrambled going, oh, what do I do next? And then this piece around the industry in terms of when we don't have a break in care, we tend to have better outcomes because
I think we might have lost you there for a second. There might have just been an internet hiccup. I think that
understanding what you're the fact it was sunny today and they had the type of coffee I like, and yesterday and the 2 days before that were terrible. But so this idea of like consistency of care can really change the pharmaceutical approach when we're able to see the long tail consistency of these medicines and the advancement of that and the efficacy of that.
Yeah, we are experiencing a little bit of internet difficulties. Apologies.
Blowing the question, the world at large. I mean, I have this, we share information like that. It's this idea of the rising tide floats all boats. And so technology allows us to be able to scale globally and to be able to share global knowledge, because as it stands now, there may be a therapist or a clinician sitting in, Saskatchewan, who is looking at a particular patient and wondering, how is it that I provide the highest base of care? And for them at the moment, that looks like a lot of work to find and research what that looks like. And so a lot of these technological platforms not only provide kind of insight to the client, but provide a better base of onboarding and care for the therapist to bring people into the work. And so I'm just like, I'm so excited of the notion of so many of these things around the technological support that we can provide, mirroring back into the fundamental ethos that most of these medicines come to, which is this idea of being connected, this idea of really being mindful about how we're being of service, and this idea of like that those who are engaged and onboarded are not in this clinician-patient relationship. We're in this like coexistent relationship where we're all advancing a better and deeper understanding of humanity and ourselves. And so I know I get a little bit charged up about it, and sometimes I start speaking quickly because I feel like what we're doing with MedTech and can really help to advance this work globally and quickly because of the deep degree of efficacy we can drive and the support we can give to patients ongoing that helps with that integration phase, which is a large part of the work.